Just a few days ago, the 3 astronauts aboard China's Tiangong space station were facing a very real problem. They suddenly had no guaranteed way to escape in an emergency. But that changed fast. China has now launched a brand new replacement spacecraft to back them up. And when you compare this rapid response to NASA's recent issues on the ISS, it raises a big question. How does China move this quickly? Today we break down exactly how they pulled it off. Lifting off at 12:11 a.m. China Standard Time, 4:11 a.m. UTC, on November 25th, a Long March 2F/G rocket launched from Site 4 at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. On board was an uncrewed Shenzhou 22 return spacecraft sent on a fast rendezvous trajectory toward the Tiangong station. Shenzhou 22 was originally planned for launch in 2026, but the mission was pushed forward for one critical reason. It became the first true emergency launch in the history of China's crewed space program. The emergency began when the Shenzhou 20 spacecraft suffered an unexpected anomaly, forcing its 3 astronauts to come home using the already docked Shenzhou 21 vehicle instead. Here's exactly what happened. In early November, the Shenzhou 21 crew arrived at Tiangong and completed a smooth handover with the Shenzhou 20 astronauts who had been living on the station for 6 months. According to the original schedule, the Shenzhou 20 team was supposed to return to Earth aboard their own spacecraft on November 5th. However, on the morning of their planned departure, China's Manned Space Engineering Office announced that the return was being delayed due to a suspected space debris strike on one of Shenzhou 20's windows. Zhou Jianping, chief designer of China's human spaceflight program, explained that on November 4th the astronauts spotted something unusual along the edge of a port window during a routine inspection. They first captured images using a standard onboard camera, then used a 40x microscope on the station to take detailed close-up photos from multiple angles. After reviewing the images, ground experts confirmed a small, triangular crack had formed. The impact appeared to strike the outermost layer of the port window's heat-insulating glass. During re-entry, a spacecraft faces extreme aerodynamic heating with temperatures soaring beyond 1,000 degrees Celsius. If the insulating glass was compromised, the astronauts could be in serious danger. Engineers immediately began simulation analyses, structural tests, and thermal assessments on the Shenzhou 20 return module. Because the damaged part was heat-resistant glass, the key question was simple. Could it withstand the brutal ablation process during re-entry? Teams used a full model of the return capsule's window, replicated the exact damage, and ran wind tunnel ablation tests. The results were clear. Under re-entry conditions, the cracks were likely to expand. China quickly convened an emergency review meeting, and everyone agreed. The risk of using Shenzhou 20 for re-entry was too high. A decision had to be made. Shenzhou 20 would not bring its crew home. Instead, the astronauts would return aboard Shenzhou 21. It sounds like swapping vehicles after yours breaks down, but in orbit, nothing is that easy. A long chain of operations has to be repeated, and the entire return plan must be recalculated from the ground up. Shenzhou 21 was configured for a fast 3-orbit return, while Shenzhou 20 was originally planned to land after 5 orbits. That meant the trajectory, timing, and coordination had to be redone in just hours. Still, the Shenzhou 20 crew made it home safely, but the emergency wasn't over. Because after they left, the Shenzhou 21 crew remained on board the station. They had only been in space for about a month of their 6-month mission. But if an emergency arose, another debris strike, a major system failure, or even a medical issue, they would need a reliable spacecraft ready for evacuation. That's where Shenzhou 22 came in. Shenzhou 22 launched on November 25th and completed a fast 3.5-hour flight to the Tiangong station, performing an automated rendezvous and docking, the same rapid docking profile used in earlier missions. The emergency launch went flawlessly. The spacecraft delivered new supplies, food, fruits, vegetables, and fresh clothing to replace what the Shenzhou 20 crew had used during their extended stay. It also brought several upgrades, including a more advanced human-machine interface, a smaller instrument panel, an improved layout inside the return capsule, and increased downmass capability for bringing materials back to Earth. It even carried a repair device designed to treat the cracks in Shenzhou 20's damaged window. According to CMSA, Shenzhou 20 will now remain in orbit for additional tests and experiments. Meanwhile, the Shenzhou 21 crew, Commander Jiang Lu, along with astronauts Zhang Hongbo and Wu Fei, are about a month into their half-year mission. They're expected to return to Earth aboard Shenzhou 22 in April or May of 2026. This entire situation highlights something important. China's human spaceflight program can move fast and make major decisions even faster. And when you compare it to recent situations aboard the International Space Station, the contrast becomes even clearer. Take 2022, for example. A docked Soyuz crew capsule suffered a coolant leak, again likely caused by a piece of space debris, and sprayed frozen particles into space. That made the spacecraft unsafe for re-entry. Russia did eventually launch a replacement Soyuz, but it took nearly 2 months to arrive. The damaged MS-22 capsule later returned to Earth empty. Then came the Boeing Starliner issue last year. The spacecraft experienced multiple helium leaks and propulsion problems, enough that NASA decided it wasn't safe for astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams to ride it home. Starliner returned empty in September 2024, and the 2 astronauts had to remain on the ISS until a regularly scheduled SpaceX Crew Dragon arrived with 2 spare seats to bring them back in March. By comparison, China executed a delayed return, a spacecraft swap, an emergency launch, and the arrival of a brand new Shenzhou, all in just over a month. So how did China coordinate such a rapid sequence of events? And more importantly, how did they manage to launch an emergency spacecraft in only 16 days? In human spaceflight, nothing matters more than crew safety, so even before the Shenzhou 20 astronauts returned to Earth, teams had already begun preparing for a potential emergency launch to protect the Shenzhou 21 crew staying aboard the station. China developed this level of readiness years ago. Since the construction phase of the space station, they followed a one launch, one backup system. For every crewed mission, there is another spacecraft and rocket sitting in standby mode at the launch site, ready to fly within 8.5 days if something goes wrong. China operates with 2 emergency timelines, an 8.5-day plan and a 16-day plan. The 8.5-day plan is used if astronauts need to be rescued as quickly as possible. But right now the station is stable and the Shenzhou 21 crew is safe. So the program activated the more flexible 16-day plan. Even so, the 16-day plan still cuts normal preparation time by more than half. So how do you launch a human-rated spacecraft that quickly? After Shenzhou 21 launched earlier in the year, work at the pad had basically wrapped up. But once the Shenzhou 20 anomaly was confirmed on November 5th, crews immediately returned and began restoring the launch area to full readiness. Fortunately, both the Shenzhou 22 spacecraft and its Long March 2F rocket were already at the site in standby mode. But even with the hardware ready, a rapid emergency launch still requires rechecking everything, every system, every procedure, every piece of ground support equipment. The launch team also had to be rebuilt, and that actually raised the difficulty level. To solve this, China kept the same core personnel who had just completed the previous mission, then added only specialists with direct hands-on experience with the Shenzhou system. And because this was an uncrewed launch, the teams collaborated with astronaut life support specialists to load food, clothing, and essential supplies into the spacecraft. That additional step actually sped up preparations overall. Originally, China's emergency launch planning didn't include loading cargo at all. It was considered too time-consuming. But with the slightly longer 16-day window, crews had enough time to prepare supplies, work extended shifts, and load everything correctly. In the end, this emergency mission ended up carrying more cargo than usual. Even though no astronauts were flying, Shenzhou 22 still had to meet the same operational standards as a normal crewed mission. The only difference was the absence of crew-specific procedures. For China, this entire sequence became a real-world high-pressure stress test of their one primary, one backup dual launch model, as well as their overall emergency response capability. Next, the Shenzhou 21 astronauts will conduct a spacewalk to inspect the Shenzhou 20 windows from the outside. After that, Shenzhou 20 will be sent back to Earth carrying cargo, allowing engineers to study the damaged areas in detail. All of this supports one goal: better understanding the dangers of space and improving the safety of future astronauts. There is one new challenge, though. There is now a readiness gap at Jiuquan. The Long March 2F rocket meant for the next crewed mission, Shenzhou 23, still hasn't arrived at the launch site. It's currently being assembled and tested in Beijing, and no timeline has been announced for when it will be shipped to Jiuquan to stand by for the next emergency. The Long March 2F is China's only active human-rated launch vehicle, developed by the China Academy of Launch Vehicle Technology. There are two versions currently flying, the 2F/G and the 2F/T. The 2F/G handles all Shenzhou missions, while the 2F/T is used for China's reusable spaceplane and also launched the first two Tiangong modules. All Long March 2F variants use the same propellant combination, nitrogen tetroxide, N2O4, and UDMH, across their boosters, first stage and second stage. The first stage uses 4 YF-20B engines, producing a combined 332 tons of thrust. 4 strap-on boosters, each with its own YF-20B engine, generating 83 tons of thrust, add another 332 tons, bringing liftoff thrust to 664 tons. The second stage uses a single YF-24B engine producing 85 tons of thrust, also burning N2O4 and UDMH. Fully assembled on the pad with the Shenzhou spacecraft and its launch escape tower on top, the Long March 2F stands 62 meters tall and weighs roughly 464,000 kilograms when fully fueled. Both the first and second stages have a diameter of 3.35 meters. The boosters are 2.3 meters wide, and the Shenzhou fairing reaches a maximum width of 3.6 meters. China's rapid handling of the Shenzhou missions this month demonstrates what a mature and well-practiced human spaceflight program looks like. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's China, the United States, or any other nation. When human lives are on the line, every space agency must be prepared to make fast, precise decisions. Spaceflight will always involve risk. That's why backup plans, emergency procedures, and rescue capabilities must exist for every possible scenario. It's simply part of the job. After all, we can't push deeper into space unless the explorers leading the way, the astronauts putting themselves on the front lines, are kept safe every step of the journey.